All right, listener name. So you're on the verge of something really exciting. Taking your pharmaceutical product global. Bringing those life-changing treatments to the world. Pretty amazing, right?
It's incredibly rewarding.
But I bet you're also feeling the weight of all those regulations. Staring down CMC, right?
Yeah.
Chemistry, manufacturing, and controls.
Yeah, it can definitely seem like a whole other world.
It's like this massive maze standing between you and the global market, and it's easy to feel a little overwhelmed.
It's definitely a challenge, no doubt about it. But it's a challenge worth conquering.
And that's why we've got you here, a true expert in navigating this global regulatory landscape, especially when it comes to CMC. Let's unravel this together, shall we? What's the key to finding our way through this regulatory maze?
You know, it's funny you use the word maze because a lot of people approach this as just checking boxes. But it's not that at all. Think of it more like building a passport for your product.
A passport.
Yeah, one that speaks directly to what each country you're targeting wants to see. You need to meet their specific requirements and expectations.
So less of a one-size-fits-all approach and more like a tailored suit for each market.
Exactly. Think about it. The US FDA is going to have different preferences than, say, the European EMA. It's almost like they each have their own dialect of pharmaceutical regulation.
Okay, I'm getting that. Different countries, different rules. Got to learn the local lingo. But even just getting started with that research.
Oh, I know what you mean.
It can feel like you're about to climb Mount Everest.
It's a bit of a balancing act for sure.
Where do you even begin to map out this regulatory landscape?
Well, imagine you're trying to keep both a librarian and an artist happy at the same time.
That's a tough crowd.
That's global CMC. You need meticulous documentation. You've got to have your data presented just right. But you also need that flexibility. You have to adapt to all those regional differences.
It's like trying to be fluent in two languages at the same time.
It is. You need to master both of those to succeed.
So how do we become fluent? How do we master the meticulous and the adaptable in this world of global CMC?
It all starts with being proactive. Don't wait until you hit a roadblock. Start those conversations with the regulatory authorities early on.
So even before we're submitting anything?
Absolutely. Think of them less like gatekeepers and more like your Sherpas, guiding you through all the treacherous parts of the mountain.
Don't be afraid to ask for directions.
That's it.
Okay, I love that. Now let's talk about building our CMC strategy, the actual foundation. Where do we start?
You have to start with a rock-solid quality system. It's the bedrock of your whole operation. And that means robust, good manufacturing practices, strong GMPs, as they're called, and crystal clear standard operating procedures. We're talking SOPs.
Right, GMP, SOPs, got it.
And those have to be meticulously aligned with international standards.
So we're basically showing the regulatory bodies that, hey, quality, this isn't just a buzzword for us. This is woven into everything we do.
Exactly. It has to be part of your DNA.
Okay, so we talk the talk, but how do we walk the walk? How do we prove it?
That's where those regular internal audits come in. Those are key. And remember, they're not just routine checkups. It's about making sure that every single part of the system is calibrated to those global standards.
So it's really about assuring those regulators that quality is a constant for us, not just a happy accident.
Exactly. It should be a given.
All right, so walk the walk, talk the talk, I'm with you. But how do we make sure that the processes we've built internally are really top-notch? How do we make them shine on a global stage?
This is where harmonizing your data comes in.
Harmonizing. So is that what it sounds like? Getting everything to play nicely together.
Exactly. Find what those different regulations have in common and build a CMC dossier that satisfies as many of them as possible right from the start.
So instead of creating separate documents, separate data sets for every country, we're finding that sweet spot.
That universal language that speaks to all the regulators.
Efficiency at its best.
Think about it. A single, comprehensive CMC dossier. That streamlines everything. You're talking faster approvals, a smoother launch. It's all about working smarter, not harder, right?
Now you're speaking the language of every company out there. But let's face it, trying to figure this out on your own.
I know, right?
It can feel like you're putting together furniture without the instruction manual. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, absolutely.
Those moments where you're just totally lost.
And that's where getting expert guidance is game-changing. It really is. Regulatory consultants, CMC specialists, they are that missing instruction manual.
They've put the furniture together a few times. They know all the shortcuts.
They can help you decode all the complexities, anticipate roadblocks before you hit them, and develop a strategy that's tailor-made for your specific product and where you want to take it.
Okay, so we've got our roadmap, we're building that solid foundation, and we're not afraid to call in the experts when we need a little help along the way.
Hmm.
But even with all that, even with the best preparation, there's always risk, right? Especially with pharmaceuticals, the stakes are high.
You're absolutely right. And risk assessment in this world, global CMC, it's not a one-time thing. It's a constant conversation.
It's like checking the weather before you go hiking, but then staying aware of the conditions throughout the entire hike. Because things change, right?
That's a great way to put it. You always have to be adapting. You have to be ready for anything.
So we're prepared for the unexpected. How do we do that? How do we build that into our strategy?
Well, you have to identify those potential issues early on, understand what kind of impact they could have, and have mitigation strategies ready to go. And there are frameworks that can help with this, like failure mode and effects analysis.
Okay, FMEA. I've heard that term thrown around.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's all about being proactive instead of reactive. It's about anticipating those bumps in the road before they turn into something major.
So instead of swerving to avoid the pothole at the last minute, we're seeing it coming and we're going around it smoothly.
Exactly.
I like that.
And it's often expected by the regulatory authorities. Showing them that you've considered these things, you've thought about the risks, it builds confidence in your application.
It shows them that you take it seriously.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're being proactive, we're thinking ahead, assessing risks. What else?
The regulatory landscape itself, it's constantly evolving. You have to stay updated on the latest guidelines, any changes, new trends.
It's like learning a new language. You got to keep practicing. You have to keep adding to your vocabulary.
It really is.
Speaking of a new language, we've mentioned ICH a few times. What exactly is that and how does it fit into all of this?
The ICH, or the International Council for Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals for Human Use, they're essentially trying to bridge the gap between all those different regulatory dialects we were talking about.
So they're like the United Nations of pharmaceutical regulation.
Exactly. They bring all those regulatory authorities together with industry experts from all over the world. And the goal is to harmonize these requirements to find common ground.
Which I imagine is no easy task.
Definitely not. But they've developed a set of guidelines, the Q series they're called.
Okay.
And those cover all sorts of aspects of drug development, including CMC.
So it's like our cheat sheet, our guidebook to speaking the language of global regulations.
Think of it as your comprehensive phrasebook.
I like it. So tell us more about these Q series guidelines. What do they actually cover?
Well, there are a bunch of them, but let's start with a few that are super relevant to what we're talking about. There's Q8, which is all about quality by design.
Quality by design. It sounds very thoughtful, very intentional.
It really is. It's about shifting from just checking boxes, saying, yep, we did that, to really understanding the why behind everything you do.
So digging deeper. It's not just about meeting the requirements. It's about understanding them, exceeding them even.
Exactly. It's about building quality into the product from the ground up.
Okay, so how do we do that?
You have to understand those critical quality attributes of your product, the characteristics that really matter when it comes to its safety and its efficacy. And then there are the critical process parameters, the key variables in your manufacturing process that can actually impact those attributes.
So it's kind of like mapping out the entire ecosystem of your product and understanding the connection between all those different elements, how they all work together.
Exactly.
And once we have that deep understanding, what can we do with it?
That's how you design a system that is robust and adaptable. A system that can consistently deliver a high-quality product even when things change. Because, let's be honest, they always do.
Change is the only constant, right? So knowledge really is power in this situation.
It really is.
Yeah.
When you understand the why, you're so much better equipped to deal with those what-ifs. What if we had to change this part of the manufacturing process? What impact is that going to have? A quality-by-design approach lets you make those decisions with confidence.
So we're not compromising the quality or safety of the product.
You've got it.
I love this. Okay, we've talked about quality by design, but I'm sure there's more to those Q series guidelines, and we're going to dive into those right after this quick break. Stay tuned. And we're back. All right, listener name, are you ready to unlock a few more levels in this global CMC game?
I think so. We've got our boots on. We're ready to climb.
I love that energy. And lucky for us, we've got expert speaker here to guide us. We've talked about the foundation, right? That rock-solid quality system. But now it's time to explore those tactical tools.
The ones that really help you conquer this whole global CMC challenge.
Exactly. And you mentioned some really important ones, those ICH Q series guidelines.
Oh yeah, those are essential.
Let's talk about a couple more of those, starting with Q9.
All right, Q9, that's all about quality risk management.
Okay, risk management. Now, there's a phrase we hear a lot, but in the context of global CMC, what does that actually look like?
You're right, it gets tossed around a lot. But in this world, it's not just about trying to avoid problems. It's about building a system where you're anticipating those problems. You're assessing their impact. You're ready to handle them if they happen.
It's like having a backup plan for your backup plan.
Exactly. You're always one step ahead. And that's where Q9 comes in. It gives you a framework, a structured way to think about risk management throughout the entire life of your product, from the moment you start developing it to manufacturing, even those post-approval changes.
Wow, so it's like having this safety net that spans the entire CMC tightrope walk.
That's a great way to put it.
Give us a taste of what that Q9 framework actually looks like. What are some of the things that companies should really be thinking about?
Well, one of the most important concepts in Q9 is risk assessment. And it's not just a one-and-done thing, you know?
Right. It's not like checking it off the list and moving on.
Exactly. It's ongoing. You're constantly evaluating, okay, what are the potential risks here? What could go wrong? And if something does go wrong, how is that going to impact the quality of our product? The safety, the efficacy, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. So kind of like we were talking about before, checking the weather before your hike, but then also being aware of those changing conditions along the way, you have to adapt.
Exactly. That's risk assessment in a nutshell.
And you mentioned a tool that can help with that, FMEA.
Right. Failure mode and effects analysis.
Can you break that down for us? What is it and why is it so useful here?
Imagine you're building a house of cards.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Very delicate process.
One wrong move and the whole thing collapses.
Yeah.
Right. So FMEA is about identifying those potential weak points, those wrong moves, and then figuring out, okay, if that happens, what's the domino effect? What else is going to go wrong?
So it's a systematic approach. You're really thinking through each step, each process, and asking yourself, what if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? What's the impact going to be?
Exactly. And by doing that, you can find those points of failure, those potential problems, before they become major setbacks.
Okay, so you're catching those problems early on, maybe even preventing them from happening in the first place.
That's the goal. And this whole idea of proactive risk management, it's not just a good idea. It's often something that the regulatory authorities are looking for.
They want to see that you've done your homework,
Exactly.
that you're not just winging it.
It shows that you're taking this seriously, that you've thought about these things, and that you have a plan.
Okay, so we're showing them that we're not just hoping for the best. We're planning for the unexpected.
And that builds their confidence in you.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about risk assessment. We've talked about FMEA. What's another one of those essential ICH guidelines we need to have on our radar?
Well, we can't talk about quality without talking about Q10.
Q10. All right, tell us more.
This one's all about building a really strong pharmaceutical quality system. And I mean really strong. It's not just about checking boxes with this one. It's about making quality part of your company's DNA.
So this goes deeper than just having a really impressive quality manual.
Way deeper.
Yeah.
This is about integrating those principles into everything you do, every single level of your organization.
But it's not just the people on the manufacturing floor. It's everyone.
From the lab to the manufacturing floor to the people making the big decisions, everyone has to be on the same page.
It's like a company-wide commitment to quality. It's part of the culture.
That's it. And when you have that, it goes beyond just meeting the regulations. It's about building a reputation. You're known for doing things the right way, for delivering high-quality products, safe products, effective products.
And that builds trust, right? Not just with the regulators, but with the patients, with everyone.
Exactly. And that's what it's all about.
Okay, so we've covered quality by design. We've talked about risk management. We've talked about building that culture of quality. But let's face it, systems and processes are important. But what about the people?
You're hitting on a really important point. The human factor is crucial.
Right. Because you can have the best systems in the world, but if your team isn't equipped to use them...
It's like having a Formula One race car but no driver. It's not going to get you very far.
Exactly. So how do we make sure our team is ready? How do we make sure they're set up for success in this world of global CMC?
Well, it has to start with documentation.
Hmm.
And I don't mean those super long, complicated SOPs that nobody wants to read.
Yeah, this can be a little intimidating.
Right. Nobody wants to sift through pages of jargon just to figure out how to do a simple task.
Exactly.
So make it easy for them. Treat those SOPs like user manuals.
Right.
Clear, simple, impossible to mess up.
Like those IKEA instruction manuals.
Exactly.
Even I can follow those most of the time.
Use visuals, step-by-step instructions, plain language that everyone can understand.
Okay, so clarity is key. What else? What other secrets to success can you share?
Training. Don't underestimate the power of good training. And not just those initial training sessions when someone first starts.
Right, it's not a one-time thing.
It has to be ongoing. Offer refreshers, make sure everyone's up to date on the latest guidelines, best practices.
So that culture of quality we were talking about,
It extends to learning, too.
it has to be a continuous process, always learning, always improving.
Exactly. And create a culture where people feel comfortable asking questions, where they feel empowered to speak up if they're not sure about something.
Because that's where you catch those little things before they become big things, right?
Exactly. You want your team to feel confident, you want them to feel empowered, and when they do, they're going to be more likely to catch those issues early on. They're going to be more likely to follow those high standards. And that's how you build a CMC dream team.
A CMC dream team. I love it. Okay, so we've talked about our internal team, but what about the regulators themselves?
With the regulators,
They can seem a little intimidating.
they can.
But you've mentioned before that they can actually be really valuable allies in this whole process.
Absolutely.
So how do we build those relationships? How do we turn those potential gatekeepers into partners?
It's all about communication, early and often.
So don't be shy. Pick up the phone.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to reach out. Ask questions. Get their input.
They've been there, done that, right?
Exactly. They've seen it all. And they can offer some really valuable insights. They can help you anticipate challenges, give you guidance on how to navigate those challenges.
So instead of seeing those interactions as these scary hurdles, think of them as opportunities.
Exactly.
A chance to learn, to build relationships, and to make sure that your CMC strategy is on the right track.
You got it?
Okay. We're getting close to the end of our CMC adventure, but before we reach the summit, I want to take a moment to talk about something that can trip up even the most prepared companies.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking common pitfalls, and we're going to dive into those right after a quick break, so stay with us. All right, listener name, we're entering the final stretch of our global CMC deep dive.
The summit's in sight.
I love it. We've covered so much ground, but before we send you off to conquer those global markets...
It's time for that last bit of advice.
Exactly. We've got expert speaker here to guide us through some of those tricky spots, those areas where even the most well-prepared companies can stumble. What are some of those common pitfalls that we need to watch out for?
One of the biggest mistakes I see companies make is treating CMC like an afterthought.
Oh, no, not an afterthought.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we've developed this amazing product. Now let's figure out how to get it approved.
Right, like packing for a trip at the last minute and realizing you've forgotten your passport.
Exactly. Not a good way to start. CMC. It needs to be right there from day one. Part of the development process from the very beginning.
So baking it into our DNA, not just slapping it on at the end.
Exactly. And when you do that, you're not just preventing headaches down the road. You're making sure that your product is designed for those global markets from the ground up.
It's like having that global mindset from the very beginning.
Exactly. And another common mistake I see, underestimating just how important those regional requirements are.
Right, because assuming that what works in one place will work everywhere else is...
A recipe for disaster.
Exactly. It's like trying to order food in a foreign country without learning a few key phrases. You might not get what you ordered.
It's a whole different language sometimes. So do your research. Talk to the local experts. Find out what they want to see.
It's like having a local guide who can help you navigate all those unspoken rules and customs.
Exactly. And speaking of navigating those nuances, data integrity. That's another one where companies can trip up.
Right, because data is everything in the world of pharmaceuticals, isn't it?
It's the foundation of everything.
Yeah.
You can have the most incredible systems, the best processes, but if your data's off, forget it. It can undermine everything you've worked for.
It's like building a house on a foundation of sand. It's just not going to last.
Exactly. You need to make sure your data is accurate, it's complete, it's consistent. You need to be able to trace it, and it has to be secure.
Data integrity. Got it. So, treat your data with respect, folks. Okay, what else? What other pitfalls do we need to be aware of?
This one's important, especially when you're dealing with regulatory authorities. Preparation is key.
Oh, yeah, those meetings.
You got to be ready for those interactions. You don't want to walk into those meetings unprepared.
It's like showing up to a presentation without having practiced your slides. Not a good look.
Exactly. Anticipate their questions. Have your data ready to go and be able to clearly articulate your strategy. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? They need to understand.
So be prepared to answer those tough questions.
Exactly. Show them you've done your homework.
And those interactions, they don't have to be scary. Think of them as an opportunity to really showcase to build those relationships, to make that approval process as smooth as possible.
Exactly. Collaboration is key.
I love that. Collaboration, not confrontation. Well, expert speaker, this has been an incredible journey.
It really has.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today, for guiding us through this world of global CMC.
My pleasure.
And to you, listener name, as you embark on this journey yourself, remember this. Careful planning, a proactive mindset, that commitment to quality, those are your keys to success. And we'll be here cheering you on every step of the way. Thanks for joining us.